Hey everybody, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we are continuing our discussion on some potentially overlooked cards in the upcoming Pokemon Sword and Shield Battle Styles set. If you're not familiar, Battle Styles is the, I guess not the next set, but the next after that set that's going to be releasing in March. I think it's March 19th, 2021. So there are some really cool cards, and they introduce a new card type, or two new card types, with the Single Strike and Rapid Strike cards. And in these sets, not every card is Rapid Strike or Single Strike. There are plenty of cards that are neither. And I want to focus on some of those cards because some of them are really interesting, really cool, and I think they just give a little bit more diversity to decks. Keep in mind that the Japanese set, which is already released, has a Single Strike set and a Rapid Strike set that are different from one another. So each set has different card lists. In a previous video, we talked about some of the overlooked cards from the Single Strike set, and now in this video, we are going to be talking about some overlooked cards from the Rapid Strike set. Also, one last note before we get started, none of this is finalized. Some of these cards might not make it into English. Some of these cards might be a little bit different or changed somehow before they are released in English. So until all these cards are confirmed 100%, some of the stuff might change. If it does, I'm sorry for the bad information. I'm just getting this from Bulbapedia. So anyway, let's get started. I'm doing these in no particular order. It's just kind of the way that they downloaded on my computer. So first up is Victini V Max, and it has the Spreading Flames attack. For just one colorless energy, you can attach up to 3 fire energies from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like, which is great. So you already have one energy attached to it to use the Spreading Flames. You can throw one more on it to use the Max Victory attack, which is 1 fire and 1 colorless energy, does 100 base damage. But if your opponent's active Pokemon is a V-type Pokemon, then this attack does 120 more damage. So you could be doing, for 2 energy, 220 damage on a Pokemon V Max. Not a, it's good damage. It really is. It is unfortunate that it takes a turn to use the Spreading Flames if you don't have something like a welder or you haven't set up energies previously. But at 310 HP, this card can definitely take a hit or two before it gets knocked out in order to use the Spreading Flames, get some energy on some other Pokemon, and then use its Max Victory attack or swap out into another Pokemon that maybe has less damage on it. I think this is a pretty good card, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see it in some fire decks. Next up is Tool Jammer, and this says as long as the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, Pokemon tools attached to your opponent's Pokemon have no effect except for Tool Jammer. And this is a really interesting card. Do I think it's better than something like Tool Scrapper, which just can eliminate 2 tools from any 2 Pokemon you want? No, maybe not. And especially if you're going to be using this with Rapid Style Pokemon that are going to be switching out from the bench and active spot pretty frequently, there may come a point where you have an active Pokemon that does not have Tool Jammer on it, and your opponent's Pokemon with like Air Balloon or Buff Padding now all of a sudden gets that bonus from its tool. So not really the best. Like I said, Tool Scrapper probably does the job a little bit better, but this, as long as the Pokemon is in the active spot, any number of tools are inactivated, and Tool Scrapper is a one-time use, get rid of 1 or 2 tools. So they have different benefits, different cons. I definitely think it's an interesting card, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see some use out of it. Next is Tapu Boolu, and it's a basic Pokemon. It has the attack Push Down for 1 grass energy, does 20 damage, but the damage isn't what we're concerned about. We're concerned about the effect of that attack. And it says your opponent switches their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. It does not specifically state that you choose which Pokemon, so it sounds like your opponent gets to choose the Pokemon that goes into the active spot, which, obviously makes this not as good. But at the same time, you could use this in a tactical sense to force your opponent to put a Pokemon that maybe has no energy on it, or that it has some type of weakness, or anything like that. This can be used if you use it wisely. Although I don't think it'll be the most widely used card, I do think that in grass decks in particular, throwing maybe one of these might not hurt if you have the space. But yeah, and then you have Nature's Judgment, 2 grass and 1 colorless for 80 base damage, and you could discard all the energy from this Pokemon to do an additional 80. So discarding 3 energy to do 160, not a ton, but again, maybe you just really need to get some damage off on a Pokemon. You can bring up a bench Pokemon and then do 160 damage potentially. I could see how it would work, but not maybe the best. Next up is Orbeez, and I'm covering this one first because there's going to be a few cards later in the video that might have some benefit from Orbeez. This Orbeez is a psychic type compared to the grass type Orbeez that we've gotten the past few, or the most recent Orbeez V. It has the attack Evo Control for 1 colorless energy, and that colorless energy aspect is really important, and you'll see why later. But for each energy attached to this Pokemon, you may search your deck for a Stage 2 Pokemon that is not an Orbeez and put it onto your bench, and then shuffle. That is really interesting. Obviously, Orbeez being a Stage 2 Pokemon does limit this a little bit, but if you can focus all of your effort on getting this Orbeez out onto the field and pumping some energy onto it, you can just throw it into the active spot and get as many Stage 2 Pokemon as you can. I think some people might look at this initially and be like, this is terrible, you're gonna have too many evolution lines. But if you run Orbeez as the only actual evolution line, and then your other Stage 2 Pokemon as just that, like no Stage 1, no basic Pokemon, you can really save on card space. And then yeah, you still have an evolution line, but it's just the one, and then you can actively search your deck for those other Pokemon. Yes, if they're in your hand or if they're prized, you won't be able to play them at all, but it's a risk you take. It also has the Zen Headbutt attack for 1 psychic and 2 colorless, does 120 damage. It's not really the focus of the card. Next up is Luxray, and this is actually a Rapid Strike Pokemon, and it's pretty interesting. It has the attack Electro Step for 1 lightning energy. This attack does 40 damage to any one of your opponent's Pokemon, and then you can switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So really good if you're trying to swap out and really minimize the amount of damage any one Pokemon takes, and that's kind of a key feature of the Rapid Strike Pokemon. I think it's pretty interesting, and I'm curious to see how it works. I know there are some decks like Orbeez V currently and Orbeez V Max that use spread damage and are constantly rotating Pokemon, so we'll see how it goes. It also has the attack Scarbeat for 1 lightning and 1 colorless. It does 100 base, and if your opponent's active Pokemon has any damage counters on them at all, then it does 100 more damage. You can easily pair this with something like Zigzagoons. You just pop a Zigzagoon down, put 10 damage on a Pokemon, bring up the Luxray, and now it does 200 damage for just 2 energy. Really, really strong. You can do this with something that poisons an active Pokemon, maybe something like a Galarian Slowbro. You put some damage, and next thing you know, you're doing 200 damage with a 1 prize card. Now, yes, this is a Stage 2 Pokemon, so getting it onto the field can be a little bit challenging. But now we have Orbeez, and we have rare candies. I still think this is a really interesting card, and I'm excited to see it get used. Next up is Cricketoon V, and it has the Excite Stage ability. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. If the Pokemon is in your active spot, then you can draw cards until you have 4, and you can't use more than 1 Excite Stage ability each turn. This is a pretty decent ability for a situation where you have just 1 energy in your hand, and you're like, what am I going to do with this? Well, or you have no cards in your hand, and you can throw down this Cricketoon V, draw 3 cards. Maybe you pick up a Marnie, you pick up a Professor's Research or a Crobat or something to get even more cards in your hand, or you're just looking for that 1 card that you need, and boom, here you go. And now you can Excite Stage. I also think this is really useful in a situation like you have 2 cards in your hand, and one of them is a Marnie or a Professor's Research, and the other is a card that you need and you can't get rid of. You can use Excite Stage to draw 1 or 2 more cards, try to find that one thing you need. It has the attack X Scissor, 1 Grass, 2 Colorless Energy, 80 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, it does 80 more damage. Not really anything special. 80 damage for 3 energy is nothing, and relying on a coin flip to do 80 more damage, not really what this card is meant to do. It's really just meant for a little bit of draw support. Next up is Kingdra, and I absolutely love this card. I think this has some serious potential to be used even in Pokemon V Max decks. Anything that uses a lot of water energy, but there's so many options to get water energies onto your Pokemon. Things like Frostmoth, Capacious Bucket. There are a bunch of acceleration routes for energies in water decks, and so Kingdra's ability is Seafloor Leader. When your active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, you can move any amount of water energy from that Pokemon to this Pokemon. And that pairs really nicely with the Aqua Burst attack, which does 40 damage for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. Yes, Kingdra is a stage 2, so it is a little hard to get out, especially if you're already running things like VMAXs and stuff, but it could definitely be useful. Now, the other issue with this card is that it says if it's knocked out from damage by an opponent's attack. So if you have a Pokemon that's knocked out by, say, poison or burn damage, or they tap it with a Zigzagoon for the final 10 damage or something like that, then I don't think that would count and be able to activate Seafloor Leader, because those aren't technically from attacks. So that is something to consider. Next up is Phalanx, and this is actually a Rapid Strike Phalanx. We've seen a few iterations of Phalanx before, and this has the attack Rapid Strike formation for 1 fighting and 1 colorless energy. It does 20 damage times the number of Rapid Strike Pokemon in play. You can have up to 6 Pokemon in play, so this can do 6 times 20 is 120 damage for just 2 energy on a basic Pokemon. Phalanx, again, being one of those kind of annoying decks to handle, and considering that you can use this with the new Rapid Strike energy, which provides 2 energy in just 1 card, you can in 1 turn throw 1 energy on this Pokemon and be hitting for 40, 80, 120 damage, depending on how many Pokemon you got on your bench. Considering the number of things like Quick Balls and other ways to get Pokemon out onto the field, capture energies, whatever, you can load up your bench pretty quickly. So for people who like to run things like Phalanx decks, then this might be an option. Next is probably one of my least favorite Pokemon. Just ignoring what it does. Just look at that. I don't want to say anything bad about the artwork, but man, this Pokemon's hard to make look cool. Like, I despise its sausage nose and everything about its body. But anyway, Kronkelder has the attack Hammer Pressure for 1 fighting energy and 2 colorless energy. It does 90 damage, and if the defending Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, it can attack during your opponent's next turn. This is an alright attack. If you have a smart player as your opponent, they can easily work around this. There are ways you can burn resources with things like switches and bird keepers and all that kind of stuff to move a Pokemon from the active spot and then retreat out the other one with an air balloon pretty easily. So not really the most effective, but it can work in certain situations, though I don't think it's necessarily worth running in a stage as a stage 2 Pokemon, that is. It also has the attack Mega Punch, 2 fighting, 2 colorless to do 150 damage. 4 energy for 150 damage is quite a lot, especially if it doesn't have any secondary effects. So probably not my favorite card, and I'm not even sure why I'm listing it. It's really just so I can just bash on how much I despise this Pokemon. Next up is Cherum. Cherum has the ability Spring in Full Bloom, which says as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a grass energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, but it does not let you do this with Pokemon that have a rule box, such as Pokemon V or Pokemon GX. And that really limits the potential use for this card. You already have something like Rillaboom, which lets you once per turn attach up to 2 energy to any Pokemon you want, the grass energy specifically, but you can attach that to your Vs, V Max, GX, you can do whatever. So the fact that you have to have the energy in your hand and you can't do it to a Pokemon with a rule box is kind of limiting, so maybe you'll see this in some one prize grass decks or something like that, but man, Rillaboom is still, I think, the way to go. Yeah, it's a stage 2, but it being a stage 2 means you could put those energy on any Pokemon you want, and I think that's a fair trade. I think that's worth it to me. But Cherum is an option. Finally, we have Bouffalant, and I'm including Bouffalant because of its ability Sap Sipper. This Pokemon's attacks do 60 more damage to your opponent's grass-type Pokemon, and I know this card has existed before, this isn't a brand new card, but I think it's interesting. I'm expecting, and this is just my personal opinion, I'm expecting Decidueye decks to be more prevalent in the next format rotation. The reason is because you're losing a lot of tag team decks, and I wouldn't be surprised if a fair amount of people who are playing tag team based decks, whether they're playing Mew Mewtwo, Reshizar, Pikarom, ADP, if at least for a little they move to a more budget friendly deck until they can get all the cards they need for maybe some of the deck that they really want to play. Also, new players who are coming in, again, Decidueye being a pretty easy deck to play. It's budget friendly. I don't see why you wouldn't have a fair amount of Decidueye decks coming up. And considering that most decks use Pokemon V, I mean, you will encounter some Decidueye decks. I've been playing in the Player Cup 3 qualifiers, and at least once or maybe every other tournament I enter, I'm encountering a Decidueye deck, or maybe 1 in 3 is probably more accurate. But I've played a handful of Decidueye decks already, and I'm sure when Tag Team is rotated out, you will see even more. So having a card like Bouffalant that it's a basic Pokemon, and it can handle Decidueye in one hit. It will one-shot Decidueye. Yes, there are other basic Pokemon that you can do this with that you don't necessarily need Bouffalant for. I just think it's interesting, and it does have the attack Head Charge, 3 colorless energy, 120 damage, and it does 30 to itself, but against a grass type, you're doing 180 damage with a 1 prize basic Pokemon. Not terrible. Spent a little bit more time on Bouffalant than I wanted, and I do plan on doing a video in the future where I kind of talk about what decks we might see in the next format rotation and how we could start to prepare for it. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching and hanging in. Let me know in the comments below, is there a particular card from the battle style set that you're really interested in that you can't wait to see? Is there a card that I missed? Is there something that you think is going to really shake up the meta, or that it's just a really interesting or cool concept for a card? I want to know about it. If you haven't already, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification button. They help out the channel tremendously. And yeah, thanks so much. I'll see you next time.